Hi, I'm Gary,
Hello, I'm Leon, the grandfather.
and we are Gary and
Grandfather, do you notice the voice? Deep, powerful, sophisticated. You notice that?
I do. I'm Leon, the grandfather.
Hi, I'm Gary.
Well,
Oh, wow. So,
to have a deep, sophisticated voice like that,
yeah,
confidence.
yeah,
That's not something that you have
naturally.
when you're back naturally or back in high school.
No.
That's something that develops over time. So tell me about you. After high school,
High school,
if you can remember.
yeah, I can, yeah. The high school, it was really a tough time for me, right? High school. Because,
Okay.
yeah, because we went from an extremely strict elementary school. So it was just after the Second World War. So you still had I'm Canadian, so you had that British influence in the schools.
Sure.
Nobody spoke. My gosh, if you spoke, they had the ADHD cure with that little rod. Nobody spoke. And then, because everyone was quitting high school, the government, in their great wisdom, decided to liberalize high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, you no longer called your teacher Mr. Smith. You called them Bob, Bill, Harry, Jane, Jenny. And the respect that you had for the teachers, which already was low, right? You're into the 70s. You know that revolutionary sort of disavowing authority and all of that. So then you had no respect. So the rate of attrition in high school actually increased. And I remember in grade 1 there were 65 kids, and there were 11 when we graduated.
Oh wow.
11, yeah. And I don't know any that went to university. I'm sure some did, of course, but for the most part, nobody thought about going to university. Get to work in the industrial sector. In my case, logging, fishing, farming, mining.
So what about you then?
Well, I took a bit of a different path because when I finished my high school, I was really lost. Didn't know what I wanted to do with life. Nothing. And so the village I grew up in was so small and so isolated. So the outside world was so far away and uncomfortable. It was like you were moving to Mars if you went to another city 3.5 hours away, right?
Uh-huh.
No idea. So I went to work for a man who owned a television and stereo store in this little village and lots of money. And I became a salesman, and I was really good. A natural salesman. Natural. Sold tens of thousands of dollars of these televisions, these stereo sofas, very expensive sofas. So the guy came to me, and his name was Ron Colson. He came to me and he said, Leon, tell you what, you stay 5 years and I'll give you, I think, 20 or 25% of the business. I'll give it to you, right? Which would have made me, at the time, a millionaire. I would have been wealthy at 23 or 24. But then the guy who was the repairman in the store, his name was Shandor Nadidveri, and he was going back to Hungary for 6 weeks for a trip. Would you like to come? Perpetual wealth or adventure, right? Wealth or adventure. And I have to decide the next day. And that night, I had an argument with my girlfriend, right? And I said, I'm not staying. I'm going. And I went, and I've been back twice in 40 years, right?
Wow.
Changed my life. And the man, this man I referred to, he's gone on to be a billionaire. I think he's probably the richest man in my province, in British Columbia, right? He owns huge amounts of real estate and logging company. His family owned a logging company as it was. He had lots and lots and lots of money here, right? But I got my life. So then I went to Hungary, and then I went to school in France. I went to school in Paris for a couple of years. Changed my life, right? So that's what happened to me. And then by that time you're 20 years old, 19 years old, and 20 years old. And I came back to Canada for a year, and then I went to school in Poland for 2 years, and then came back and stayed and went to school in Canada again. You know, so yeah, that was my, and it was finding yourself in that sense, right? It was hard, but as soon as I made this, I'm very shy, right? So as soon as I was able to make the step away, everything else seemed to act. Like I really do believe. I say this to all my students all the time: action or inaction is an action.
Oh, sure.
And just by acting, you get results. Not always good, by the way. Not always good. Now, how about you, Gary? What about you?
Well, through high school, I was always interested in computers, and building websites and things like that. And so I decided, well, what I want to do is I want to be a programmer when I grow up. I want to make video games and be a programmer. Maybe also design websites. And I had some website design ability, self-taught. Where I self-taught. And this was back around 2000. I think my first website I started around 1999.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I decided that's what I wanted to do. Programming, I had no experience, but I thought it would be interesting. So I went to university, and a lot of the other classmates of mine from larger schools, they had programming experience. Maybe it wasn't a lot of experience, but they've had some experience. I had none.
Yeah.
And to program, you have to think in a certain way. You have to train yourself to think in a certain way for solving problems, basically. And at that time, I didn't have the experience. I had no idea about it. So in my classes, I was working really hard, putting in long hours, and the scores, they just weren't very good. They were average at best. So for about a year and a half, I just kept floating on by, where I was good enough I could stay in the program, the course, but I wasn't doing well and I hated it. So then after about 3 semesters, I dropped out and switched over to management information systems and technology studies. So I would be doing some programming stuff, but it was involved more so with business, with the business side of things. Here, I did extremely well because my stint in the computer science program, suddenly I was the one who had the experience compared to the other people. So I was doing extremely well compared to them. And I thought it was acceptable. I couldn't really see myself doing this kind of job when I got out of school, but I was doing well with it, more or less. I thought it was okay. It was a lot better than what I was in before. But at some point, my brother decided to, because he was going to the same university, he decided to take a free elective course, a German course. I thought it was kind of interesting, and because my family ancestry, we have some German and Dutch ancestry.
Okay.
So I felt there's kind of this connection, and so a few semesters later, I took a German course, same professor as my brother had, and I quite liked it. And my professor said, "Oh, you should minor in German language."
Wow.
I said, "Okay, maybe." So I talked to my parents about it, and they were kind of, iffy about it, but decided to go for it. And then, because of that, I studied abroad in Germany.
Wow.
And that was kind of a pivotal moment for me.
Yeah.
Spent a semester over there, and you know, when I quite enjoyed it. I got to see. I grew up in a small town, so I got to experience a lot of things.
Big city life.
Yeah, a lot of things, and it just started to change my world of view a bit, my perspective.
Mm.
So when I came back to the States, to my university and back home, I just felt I didn't feel satisfied. I really didn't want to be back, and I didn't feel satisfied, and just felt fed up and frustrated, and I didn't want to. I lost all interest in this information systems major.
Mm.
I was just interested in languages, and so I switched my major again to English language, and decided, well, when I finish a university, I'll go abroad someplace and teach ESL, and then
See what happens.
see what happens. And then I got involved with writing and stuff as well, and it all happened because of that
Action.
action.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, I in some ways it's wonderful. In other ways, like I guess your situation, one small thing
Yeah.
changed your life.
Yeah.
The trajectory of your
Yeah.
life.
Well, the wonderful part about life, Gary, though, I've always remarked on is that everything I've done in my life, good and bad, have brought me to this moment talking to you. And the only question I ever ask myself in any circumstance, am I happy with the now? Right now, am I happy talking to you?
Mm-hmm.
All the streams that have produced this moment, am I happy with what has occurred? And in my case, I would say the majority of times I can answer in the affirmative. I'm happy where I am, right? And I'm not the kind of person who has any regrets, none.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly there are things I would never ever do again, right?
Yeah.
Romantic and otherwise, right?
Sure.
Financial. I mean, it just goes on, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, but I have no regrets for the experience. What for? It's past. I don't have a lot of respect for people. Yeah, story kind of troubled me a little bit. I spoke to this one man, and he's always very sad, and more than once. And his wife died 8 years ago, and he can't get over the death of his wife. So I asked him the standard question: are you happy? Would you rather your wife were alive and you were dead? Would your wife be sad? And he said, of course. And I said, well, then would you rather have? Your wife sad or you sad? Which one? But it didn't change his thinking, sadly. But that's the standard psychological question, right? Would you rather be in that awful situation that your wife is suffering? Put your wife in that circumstance. But it didn't change him. So he obviously, after 8 years, he wants to be sad. He's identified with this. This is who he is, right? And why would you do that to yourself when you have one life in this reality? I mean, we're all going to suffer loss and pain and suffering and all of those things. I mean, I listened to an interesting article this morning. The professor was saying that God, when he created the universe, obviously knew that mankind would suffering. So what's the purpose of suffering? And the purpose of suffering is to be challenged, of course, to overcome the suffering. And now sometimes the suffering is so much maybe you can't overcome. But even the most horrible suffering, people that physical infirmities, loss of money, jail, Viktor Frankl, concentration camp, 3 years, loses his pregnant wife, loses his mom and dad, loses his brother and his brother's wife, all killed by the Nazis, and yet comes out, produces a successful life. And he's not unique. He's just documented this story in Man's Search for Meaning. But there's many scholars and people in life have suffered tremendous losses. And you think, how can a man overcome this suffering? Or a woman? But they do. They do. And they give us their wisdom because of it, right? So,
I think people are very resilient,
Yeah, me too.
And
Yeah.
but I also, like you said, I do think, I do believe that the some people, it's very hard for them to overcome their problems or their their losses or their
Yeah.
frustrations.
Yeah.
I think some people, they don't know how to do it, or it's easier to do nothing and feel sorry for yourself than to take an action. For me, one of the things I try to do when I feel fed up and frustrated about something is I'll always think about, like you said, people who are Holocaust survivors, or people who had suffered from really horrible, terrible things.
Yeah.
And I think overall, compared to a lot of those atrocities, that my life has been easy, has been simple, compared to a lot of what I've seen, some of the horrible things. And so I don't think we can't like quantify pain and say, okay, well, your pain suffering is more than my pain suffering.
Yeah.
You can't do that,
No.
for sure. And everybody, their genetic makeup is going to,
Deal
and
with
their
pain
chemical
and-
makeup is going to deal with it in a different way,
Yeah, for sure.
decide how they handle it, and so on and so forth, their
Yeah.
upbringing, their situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do think that, for me personally, I try to keep that in mind. Think about, okay, yeah, this is pain, suffering, whatever. But at the same time, think about those people. I really am fortunate for what I do have, and
Yeah, absolutely. Gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Every day. For
that, I
that.
think it really, really helps. It really does.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that you brought up an interesting idea. You know, what is happening now is this concept of resilience. It's not being brought forward because nobody's been tested. There's been no conflict. There's been no war. Like at the moment with the wars that are existing in the world,
Mhm.
and the war that's ongoing now in the Ukraine, for instance. I mean, there's lots of fear that we're getting introduced to a new cycle of war, and yet we're not ready for war. So what
Mhm.
will that mean? I mean, I've never experienced war. I have no idea. It's just what I read, you know. And I'm old, so you know, there's been no war in Europe for over 70 years, right? And everyone forgets that from Moscow to Paris, you know, well, really on to London, really, that, you know, the average city was maybe half a meter tall because it was just carpet bombed. It was gone. The roads were gone. The airports were gone. The highways were gone. The sewage systems broken. No water. No bridges. Gone. Chaos. Right? So I really think it behooves people to be a little bit thoughtful about what's occurring in life at the moment, you know, and stand back and say, hey, I mean, you know, a friend of mine once said, you know, I think it's true. It's far easier to be unhappy than to be happy. And I think that I've said this to you before, and I think that's true, right? That's easy to be unhappy because happiness requires effort, right? Requires work, right? Like your experience going to Germany. I mean, it was tough for you, I'm sure. It was not easy, you know. You know, you had to force yourself.
Well, no. That was great. Going to Germany was great. Readjusting, coming back to the small town life, that was
Hard.
hard. That was really hard. It's like the lid of the Pandora's box has been
Open.
opened, and you've just experienced a whole other
Yeah.
world, and then you're going back to transplant back into
Yeah.
you know, your small
Yeah.
rural country area. And the thing, you've probably experienced it yourself as well, but one of the situations I think that you do run into sometimes, if you've become well-traveled or end up getting involved in something that a lot of people don't experience, at least in your
Yeah.
your class or your group or whatever,
You're an outsider.
is that, yeah, and maybe you just want to talk to your friends or people about it, and maybe the first time you talk about it, they're interested, they're willing to listen. But then, after a while, they either think you're pompous, or they just can't relate to you, or they think you're, the arrogance is there,
right.
and
That's right.
and like for example, one day, I was I posted a picture on one of my social media accounts. I was drinking a Coca-Cola with coffee, and they market it in Asia, maybe Australia. They did for a time, and
Coca-Cola and coffee.
yeah,
Wow.
it was really good.
Really? I bet.
It was really good.
Yeah.
It didn't sound good, but it was really
Tasty.
really tasty.
Wow. Wow.
And then the one of my friends, Facebook friends, classmate of mine, I've known him since we were maybe 12, 13. We were in the same homeroom together.
Wow.
So and some classes, but the same homeroom. So
Yeah. So
we
you
had
know
plenty of time
Yeah.
to talk to each other and
Yeah.
everything. And he says to me, he said, "Oh wow, that looks really interesting. Where'd you get it?" And I thinking to myself, well, I got it at 7-Eleven convenience store,
Yeah.
which is where I got it. But I can't just respond saying that, because I know that the 7-Eleven, if I say that, he'll go down to the 7-Eleven in our hometown. They're not gonna have it, and then when it comes around to the fact that
I'm lying now.
well, not that I'm lying, but eventually it's gonna come to the fact that I was living abroad and I got it at the convenience store abroad, and then suddenly it's going to
Pompous, arrogant.
pompous arrogance, the whole thing, even if you're not trying to be. So yeah, so I think that was the challenge, trying to readjust.
Yeah.
And
The guy one of the guys I went to high school with, for whatever reason, out of the blue, maybe a year ago, suddenly his wife is writing me on Facebook, and she writes me.
his wife.
His wife, yeah. I maybe met her. I don't remember meeting her, but maybe I did.
I guess
But
she remembered you.
But obviously, so she's writing me. Oh, Doug's doing so well, and blah blah blah. And then, where are you living now? And I didn't know what to say, so I wrote the truth, and I got no response for 2 days. And then I got the response. Oh, you must. Do you like it there? And I wrote, yeah, a lot. And then that was it. No more contact.
And that was it.
None.
Oh.
None.
Yeah.
Just none. Like you're a Martian now, right?
Mm.
But which poses an interesting problem. What happened? Like I'm going home this summer, right? One of my sons, going to have a child.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be a real grandfather. Wow.
Mhm.
And I'm going to go home, but I haven't been to Canada for 3 years, right? And obviously society has moved on.
Oh,
Right?
yeah. of
So
course.
I just wonder what it will be like, because you will. I mean, I've lived abroad for a very long time already, but I always went back every 6 months, etc., right?
Mm.
Or every 4 months, for that matter. But this has been because it was easy. It was only 2 days, you can overnight, and you're there virtually, right? Sleep on your plane, you're there, right? And spend a week, 2 weeks, come back, same, easy,
Mhm.
it's nothing. Went to Europe the same way, I went to a wedding once in southern Poland. I left Thursday night and I was back to work Monday morning.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Wow.
Where were you on the weekend? Poland. Oh,
Well, then they're gonna start thinking the same thing.
yeah,
There's that
absolutely.
pompous arrogance.
Pompous arrogance, But it was the truth. I hate lying,
Yeah.
So, but now, what will happen when you're my family already thinks I'm strange now that I'm, that I've gone away to some distant land, and I haven't. I just like it where I am. I'm happy here.
Mhm.
What's wrong with being happy? Right? Which lends me to a question, Gary, that I was going to ask you. When you would agree that when you left high school, in your mind, in my mind, I was not thinking about income, money, none of those things. But I promised myself, in my life, my piece of life,
Mhm.
I was going to be successful,
Mhm.
right? Whatever that meant to me. Did you have the
Yeah.
same feeling? Right? Success, not I'm going to be king of England or what have you. Success, whatever that meant to me. Did you have that?
Well, yeah, actually, I don't remember this at all, but my mother had mentioned it to me several years back that apparently, even in high school, senior year, whatever, I was voted to be the most likely to succeed
Wow.
in the class,
Wow.
and I don't remember that. And then with the whole computer science programming thing, that was really but yeah, I figured I would succeed,
Yeah.
have a job that I liked, do what I like doing, a job I like,
Yeah.
successful,
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
maybe a wife, kids.
Yeah, been paid for it and all of that,
Yeah.
The reason I ask this is because we have to somehow disassociate money from success. And I like money. Why not? Money's wonderful. You can buy wonderful things, good clothes, everything. But I know that these are just things. And history, I'm enough of an historian to know that this could be all gone, but there's still this here, right? There's me. And I must be, especially in this modern world, plastic money, fake money, internet money, God knows what. With that kind of world, I have to be prepared to lose all the things around me materially, and yet I can still go forward and reintegrate my life. I have to think this way because the world's too fluid at the moment. The money markets are, energy is doubled in Europe now because of the crisis. Doubled. 100%. 100%. And at the moment, Europe supposedly is giving Russia $1.2 billion a day for its oil and gas. So I was saying the other day, just cut off the oil and gas. Europe would die. So we're also interlinked, you see, right? So we don't know what happens, right?
Well, I used to think as well, equate success with money.
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
a lot of people, young people do,
Me too.
and I used to, but then after a while, I met some people and started talking with them, and it just started changing my viewpoint a bit, and I started realizing that to have a successful life, number one for me, is to be doing something that I like to be doing. That's the first thing. I think a lot of young people now, for better or worse, a lot of young people now, some of the careers they're trying to build are based on this idea of doing what they like to be doing. And some of those careers, I look at them, I think, well, and this shows that I'm getting older too. I think, get a job, social influencer,
Yeah.
or a video game,
Consultant.
not consultant, the competition, the player.
Yeah.
I think get a job, but at the same time, I don't think it's entirely fair, because if they're making a lot of money from what they're doing, and they're doing what they love to do,
Bless them.
yeah,
I have this very old friend in Vancouver. He's 93. His grandson, he told me, just a dissolute kid. He never thought he'd achieve anything. Got picked up by one of the universities, big university in the United States, New York, whatever, to join their gaming team. Gaming team.
yeah, that's what I mean.
They went from the 14th highest in the world to the 4th, supposedly. So and he's on the gaming team, the university gaming team, whatever that would mean.
Yeah, like that, as I said, that sounds ridiculous to me, but
Yeah, it does.
at the same time, and so for me, that's what I started to think about with success. And so I like doing things. I like doing things for the sake of doing things.
Yeah.
I like learning, trying new things,
Yeah.
experiencing new things, just for the sake of doing it. And I think that's you know, for me, that's kind of success. Just having a life, a good life where you're doing what you enjoy doing.
Yeah, yeah. Can I a total aside?
Sure.
A total aside. Talking about doing what you really enjoy doing.
No,
Okay.
no, here we go.
There's this. I'm watching this on the Discovery Channel recently. There's a guy in the States. He likes restoring World War II tanks.
Okay.
Tanks. He buys tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's got a team of 4 men,
Mm-hmm.
and they upgrade the tank to working order, and he buys them all over the world.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Wow, it's really cool. But
That's
you can
kinda cool.
imagine, what's your hobby? I collect tanks. Yeah, and they recently found a rare a rare tiger in some river in Poland. It sunk, and they abandoned it, and it got covered by mud, and nobody found it until the river had declined
Really?
a bit in the latest heat wave. And here's the tank. And it wouldn't start, but they got the engine restarted, and the whole thing. Like, apparently a rare model. They had it there in the video. So there we are.
Oh, that's really cool.
Doing what you love. Tanks.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I think in the end, I think that's what we should be doing.
Yeah.
That if you're true to yourself, you know, if you're true to yourself, I was reading some stories about some people in where was it? I think it was Taiwan,
Yeah.
where there's a problem over there where there's a lot of younger people that they're all becoming doctors and lawyers and
Yeah. Candlestick makers.
engineers, and
Yeah.
it's pressure from the parents, of
Okay.
course, and
Yeah.
for the status, the money.
Yeah.
And I was reading about this one guy, grew up in the countryside, maybe the same as us, and went up to the capital, up to Taipei, become an engineer or something. Of course, he went to the best schools, probably got 2 or 3 degrees. Went up there, lived there for about 5-10 years, hated it, returned to the rural area where he's from, started growing grapes, and then just became a winemaker.
Huh?
And he just did it because that's what he liked doing. You know, that he could have had the riches, I think he studied in maybe Germany or someplace
Huh?
for the I think he did like a short program for the wine making to learn some of the process and everything.
Huh?
And that was after he quit his professional job up north. But yeah, gave it up. I bet his family, they weren't too
No, it went crazy.
too happy about that.
Yeah.
But he just really
Well, yeah.
just preferred this kind of life.
I was going to say, I had a friend who got accepted in South Africa, got accepted to medical school, working class people.
Mm-hmm.
So my son's going to be a doctor. I'm just so excited, right? And he's a very good student. The first year, top score. The second year, they brought in the cadavers,
Oh.
right? And they got to lance the cadaver, and even though they're in the formaldehyde, there's odor and everything. He's doing whatever they do, and he got sick, vomited. And the professor said to him, don't worry, Hubert, you'll be fine, right? But he continued to get sick, and he realized after about 3 weeks, he's sick every day. I can't do this. So he quit. Family popped, of course. But then he eventually went back to school and got a PhD in music, which is what he loved, right? So I guess that's the message. I mean, you know, ultimately, I don't. It's not being selfish, as we say, but ultimately, if you're not, I mean, if you believe like I do, you have one life in this consciousness, and God wants you to be happy. Aristotle tells us we're all naturally happy, but how do I discover my happiness? Well, I got to put in my own efforts, right?
Yeah.
You know, I got to discover. I just can't say, okay, that's nice, I want to do that. You know, come on. Right? I mean, and we've had enough experience economically to know just maybe that's not, given a choice between us, I was describing that village and millions of dollars at 23 or seeing the world, which life has been a better life? And I think I chose accidentally or by plan correctly for me. Of course, I'm describing me,
Yeah.
you know. And I think all of us have to face those types of questions, I feel.
Well, I guess it's getting late here, but I think that's one other thing that a lot of people are. Last point, I guess. One other thing a lot of people are afraid to do. Young people, middle-aged people, old people, whatever. I think when we get older, we stand up for ourselves a bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
Not all everyone.
No.
I guess a lot of us do. Hopefully.
Yeah, we do.
But-
We do, because you don't care.
But I think that a problem, especially younger people have, is a lot of them, they feel pressured by their peers or their parents or their whomever, teachers, whoever, to do. They place too much stock
In social status.
in well, I was just not social status, but in what other people tell them is the
Yeah.
right choice to make.
Mm.
So, for example, with you and the situation with your village, I think probably anyone would say, yeah, you stay with the company for 5 years and you take the cash.
Yeah,
Come on, that's what everyone would say. I've had friends who, when given the choice of which grad school to go to, one is really the best in the country. The other one is still a good university, but it's not as good. The program they'd be studying at the best university is for someone they're not really interested in. The program at the okay university
That's what they love.
is what they love. Parents, whoever, say, gotta take the best. And the list goes on and on.
Sure it does.
And I think this is the problem, is a big problem. We need to, I think we should consult people to hear other people's advice and thoughts. I think that's important.
Yeah, for sure.
To think about other, because sometimes we can be so blinded by whatever our own thought is. We need to hear other people, older people, younger people, people who are from other backgrounds, just to,
It's true in relationships, right?
yeah, I
You're
think,
going to get married. Don't marry him, but marry her. Whatever, We
I
need
think-
to hear this.
I think you do need to hear other people's opinions about whatever, career, relationships. But at the end of the day, you need to decide for yourself
Yes,
what's the best for you.
for sure.
And it might be difficult if you have believe in a higher power. That's where you can pray on it and
Absolutely.
reflect on it, meditate, whatever. But I think that's very important to do. That you can't just,
Go along with everyone
go
else.
along with everyone else. That's how you end up
Bitter. Well, you
in
get bitter.
situations that
Get
you
sick.
really don't want to be in.
And psychologically, it's hard on you. It's not good for the body. Physically, it's not good for the body.
Oh yeah.
I mean, why do industrial workers die early? Right? Because they don't like what they're doing. Simple. So, good thoughts. Good thoughts.
Anything else you want to add?
Well, there's always something to add, isn't it? But I think I'm going to go. I'm going to go home and I'm going to go to sleep. I think.
Oh yeah, you're looking tired.
I'm not looking so tired. I'm okay.
Okay, well, good night, everyone. Gary out.
The grandfather. Out.
Good night.
Good night now.